guys, welcome back to this YouTube channel. I have a guest today. His name is Tommy and it's my cat. I'm here at home today. You better quit. He's very playful. So he's probably going to be in our video if that's okay with you guys. So what we're going to be doing today we're going to read chapter 12 of Mr. Popper's Penguins. So yesterday we read chapter 11, and just a little review of what happened in chapter 11. So Greta came to the house to live with Captain Cook and Mr. Popper and his family. So if you guys remember in this picture, Mr. Popper had opened the window and let all of the snow come in because there was a blizzard, and he covered the whole floor with water so it would change into ice so that the penguins would be a little bit more comfortable. And at the end, we kind of recapped about how Miss Popper was maybe not feeling her best about this whole situation because the house was getting messy, obviously because the window was open and the snow got all in, and she's very tidy, so she likes everything kind of neat and in order. So she was kind of frustrated about it tomorrow, and the very last sentence in chapter 11 says, "I will do something about it tomorrow," said Mr. Popper, talking about cleaning up the flood that he had made. So he said, "I'll just do it tomorrow." And that's where we left off. So today we're going to be starting on chapter 12, and this chapter is called More Mouths to Feed. Now, just thinking about that chapter title, it kind of makes me think that they're going to have a lot more penguins, and I know you guys would probably agree. So let's get started. We're going to read chapter 12, More Mouths to Feed. Okay. So the next day, Mr. Popper called an engineer and had a large freezing plant installed in the cellar, and took Captain Cook and Greta down there to live. Then he had the furnace taken out and moved upstairs into the living room. It looked very odd there, but as Mrs. Popper said, it was a relief, at least not to have to wear her overcoat all the time. Mr. Popper was quite worried when he found that all these changes were going to be very expensive. The refrigerating engineer was worried too, when he found that Mr. Popper had practically no money. However, Mr. Popper promised to pay as soon as he could, and the man let him have everything on credit. So he's just going to pay him back later, pretty much. It was a good thing that Mr. Popper got the penguins moved when he did, because Mrs. Popper had been right about the eggs. The rookery had scarcely been moved to the basement when Greta laid the first egg. 3 days later, the second one appeared. Okay, so now Greta already has one egg, and then she laid another one 3 days later. So now they have 2 eggs. Since Mr. Popper knew that penguins lay only 2 eggs a season, he was astonished when a little later the third egg was found under Greta. Whether the change in climate had changed the penguins' breeding habits, Mr. Popper never knew, but every third day a new one would appear until there were 10 in all. So Greta was having an egg every 3 days, and so until there were 10 eggs in all. So Greta and Captain Cook together had 10 eggs, is what this is saying. So that is crazy. Now, penguin eggs are so large that the mother can sit on them only 2 at a time, and this created quite a problem. Mr. Popper solved it, however, by distributing the extra eggs under hot water bottles and electric heating pads, kept just at penguin body heat. The penguin chicks, when they began to hatch, were not so handsomely marked as their mother and father. They were fuzzy, draw-like creatures who grew at tremendous rate. And there's a little picture. And if you guys remember, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but the baby penguins, whenever they're born, they don't look like the adult penguins. They don't have the black and white features. They are fluffy. They're kind of like little fluffy bears. They don't have the same feathers, but once they grow up, they will. So that's what they're saying about how they were fuzzy and that they grow at a tremendous rate. So they grow really fast. Captain Cook and Greta were very busy bringing food to them, though of course the Poppers all helped too. Mr. Popper, who had always been such a great reader, had no difficulty in thinking of names for the penguin children. They were Nelson, Columbus, Louisa, Jenny, Scott, Magdalene, Adeline, Isabella, Ferdinand, and Victoria. Still, he had rather he was rather relieved that there were no more than 10 to name. So he named all 10 of those little baby penguins. Mrs. Popper, too, thought that this was about enough penguins for everybody, though they really did not make much difference to her in her housework as long as Mr. Popper and the children remembered to close the cellar door in the kitchen. The penguins all loved to climb the stairs that led up to the kitchen and never knew when to stop unless they found the kitchen door closed. Then, of course, they would turn around and toboggan down the steps again. This made rather a curious noise sometimes when Mrs. Popper was working in the kitchen, but she got used to it, as she had to get used to so many other strange things this winter. The freezing plant that Mr. Popper had got for the penguins downstairs was a large and good one. It made very large blocks of ice instead of small ice cubes, so that soon Mr. Popper had made a sort of ice castle down there for the 12 penguins to live and climb over. Mr. Popper also dug a large hole in the cellar floor and made a swimming and diving pool for the birds. From time to time, he would throw live fish into the pool for the penguins to dive for. They found this very refreshing because, to tell the truth, they got a little tired of canned shrimp. The live fish were specially ordered and were brought all the way from the coast in tank cars and glass boxes to 432 Proudfoot Avenue. Unfortunately, they were quite expensive. It was nice that there were so many penguins because when two of them, usually Nelson and Columbus, got into a fight and began to spar at each other with their flippers, the 10 other penguins would all crowd around to watch the fight and make encouraging remarks. This made a very interesting little scene. Mr. Popper also flooded a part of the cellar floor for an ice rink, and here the penguins often drilled like a sort of small army, in fascinating marching movements and parades around the ice. The penguin, Louisa, seemed especially fond of leading these marching drills. It was quite a sight to see them, after Mr. Popper had the idea of training Louisa to hold a small American flag in her beak while she proudly led the solemn parades. Janie and Bill would often bring their little friends home from school with them, and they would all go down and watch the penguins for hours. At night, instead of sitting and reading and smoking his pipe in the living room, as he had done before, Mr. Popper would put on his overcoat and take his things downstairs. There he would sit and read with his mittens on, looking up from time to time to see what his pets were doing. He often thought about the cold, distant regions in which the little creatures really belonged. Often, too, he thought how different his life had been before the penguins had come in and occupied him. It was January now, and already he dreaded to think of the time when spring would come, and he would have to leave them all day and go to painting houses. And that is where we left off. There's a little penguin. So that is chapter 12. So a lot happened in chapter 12. So Captain Cook and Greta had 10 little babies. They had 10 little eggs who hatched into 10 little babies, and Mr. Popper named all of them. And he also made them an ice rink. He made them a diving pool. He made them a swimming pool in their house. I couldn't imagine having all of that stuff in my house, or coming from Mrs. Popper's perspective, having her husband doing all of this stuff in her house, and she really likes to keep everything tidy, and he's doing all of this. So it's just crazy. So something else is that Mr. Popper decides, he kind of sees them all marching around together in the basement on the ice, and he says that they're marching in a fantastic marching movement, and that Louisa is leading them around, and she's leading the marching drills, and she seems to really enjoy it. So Mr. Popper had an idea, and he decided to train Louisa to hold an American flag in her mouth, like in her beak, while she was proudly marching around and kind of leading this little group. So that kind of makes me think, and let me know if you guys agree. You can comment below, you can message me on Class Dojo. I think that Mr. Popper is going to see that these penguins really love to kind of perform and do these different tricks. So maybe he might train all of them, and they might do something really cool. But we'll have to see. So tomorrow we'll be reading chapter 13 And this chapter is called Money Worries. Money Worries is what the next chapter is called. So be thinking about what you think is going to happen in the next chapter, or what you thought about this chapter, because I know this is a big chapter and I really wish that I was with you guys to talk to you about it, but I'm not. So if you would like to, comment below or message me on Class Dojo. Tell me your thoughts. Let me know what you think about Mr. Popper's Penguins as of now. And I would love to hear that. So, with that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow, whenever we read chapter 13. I hope you guys are staying safe, and staying occupied while you're at your house. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Bye!